How did ordinary soldiers live during World War II? What did they eat, and what were they thinking about? Are the myths about unlimited chocolate rations true? What kind of pills did the soldiers take while capturing France? These and many other questions we will discuss here and now. Meet our guest, radio operator Noah Schneider. It's June 7, 1940, and as you can imagine, the mood of our guy is high, because the German army is crushing the French army like a bun at lunch. The so-called Battle of France is hard to call a battle. In its decisive phase, from June 5 to June 12, the fighting resembled a massacre. The French tried their best, but were capable of very little to counter the Germans. Somewhere nearby, along the Seine River, our Noah is preparing to complete the destruction of the French 10th Corps, assisted by the Scottish Division. The main reason for Noah's elevated mood is not the superiority of German technology. In this regard, the French were only slightly behind. Noah is confident in the victories due to the brilliant tactics and strategy of the Third Reich. The French army was living by the blueprints of World War I. Orders from commanders could take days to reach the units due to the slow couriers and distrust of technology, whereas in the German army, orders even from the Berlin offices could reach the front line in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes. Every capable unit had a radio operator, and Noah was one of them. Almost 24 hours a day, Noah received intelligence, transmitted it to headquarters, and then delivered new orders to field commanders. French generals were too lazy, slow, and foolish, and the German soldiers saw this every day. They were never in doubt about the outcome. Faith in their superiority allowed Noah and his comrades to carry out exhausting 24-hour marches and constantly move forward. This is the famous blitzkrieg tactic, known to all, and we won't dwell on it. Let's talk instead about the high morale, the only thing that helped the Germans fight around the clock. The decisive role was played by a little pill called Pervitin, the impact of which on the French campaign has been revealed in recent years. A documentary investigation by the Apps channel, called Secrets of the Dead, revealed a lot of interesting information. Specifically, the chance that Noah took Pervitin is almost 100%, because lower-ranked soldiers were routinely given it. Officially, Pervitin is an amphetamine, and I don't think we need to explain how it works. It gives you wings, accelerates you, and removes fatigue as such. Of course, in the long run, the effects are devastating for the body, but did the command care about the long-term health prospects of the soldiers? They needed victories here and now, so Pervitin and even cocaine were gladly used. But don't be too quick to blame the Germans. The same tactics were used by the British and Americans. However, the latter mostly supplied it to their sentries and guards to keep watch. And in war, all notions of good and bad get blurred. Even medics used Pervitin to treat the wounded. It helped them cope with post-traumatic stress. So, our Noah was taking it constantly, but anyone familiar with biology knows that such a load requires a price in calories. And eating was a necessity for the Germans. There is a myth that the soldiers of the Wehrmacht ate lobsters in black caviar sauce and washed them down with thousand-year-old cognac. This is not exactly true. Our Noah, like other ordinary soldiers, followed a strict diet. Napoleon once said that the strength of an army lies in its stomach, and the leadership of the Third Reich followed that advice, hiring a bunch of scientists to calculate the proper rations. At the helm was Richard Walter Durr, who didn't quite manage the task. The Germans loved meticulousness, and the diet was calculated down to the gram. In 1940, Noah and his comrades received 2 hot meals and 1 cold meal every day. But this was not the dry ration described in the myths. Mobile divisions of the Wehrmacht were always followed by field kitchens. This is where the soldiers ate 90% of the time. Noah's breakfast was modest: bread with butter, a little marmalade, and, if lucky, some sausage. The plan was for the soldiers to get 1/6 of their daily calorie intake at breakfast. The main meal was lunch, which made up 50% of the daily calorie intake. Lunch consisted of meat, which in 1940 was still acceptable, but a couple of years later, even horse meat would be used. Meat was accompanied by fruits and vegetables, and something sweet, usually condensed milk. Unfortunately, dinner wasn't as good. On paper, the soldier was supposed to eat 3 meals worth of calories, but usually, it was just a repeat of breakfast, and soldiers barely made it through to the next morning. Occasionally, something interesting would appear on the kitchens, but overall, the food policy of the Third Reich was average. The British were eating steaks and the Americans with their candies had it better. It's no wonder that in 1942, the Minister of Industry was fired. As for the famous iron rations, about which so many myths have been told, our Noah only received them in the field or when under fire. The order to open these rations was given by the command if it wasn't possible to set up a field kitchen. The rations were called iron rations and came in two categories, half and full. A half ration contained 200 grams of canned meat and 250 grams of crackers. The full iron ration had several variations, mainly depending on the severity of the situation the unit found itself in. If Noah's unit got stuck in combat, the commander would order them to be supplied with the most packed rations, which would include 850 grams of canned goods, 150 grams of peas, and from 20 to 50 grams of coffee. There were no sweets in the rations, even in 1940. The Germans were pragmatic, packing as many calories as possible into the smallest possible weight. However, the taste left much to be desired. Soldiers often survived on sweets sent from home or captured during battle. As the war went on, as you can imagine, the situation only worsened. Another interesting fact, coffee. There are plenty of legends floating around about how German soldiers sipped aromatic coffee during meals. In reality, Noah could only dream of real coffee. It was a luxury at the field kitchens, and in 99% of cases, the iron rations contained ersatz coffee, which was a beverage made from acorns of oak trees. This ersatz coffee was consumed throughout Germany, and soldiers were no exception. Calling this brew coffee is a stretch, but overall, it kept the soldiers warm, and in military conditions, no one complained. As for the overall food system, it wasn't ideal but was highly pragmatic, and no one went hungry. But that didn't change the fact that soldiers were heavily drugged and suffered from a myriad of health problems in the long run. Now, let's talk about salaries. Our Noah, a low-ranking German soldier, received what was known as a frontline pay, which was untaxed. The Wehrmacht paid 30 Reichsmarks per month. This money was usually automatically transferred to a bank account in Germany, but soldiers could cash out some of it locally or get paid in installments every 10 days. When Noah gets promoted, he will earn 35 Reichsmarks, and if he becomes a sergeant, his pay will increase to 60 Reichsmarks. Officers' salaries started at 70 Reichsmarks and could reach 200. Even a colonel earned only as much as 10 of our Noahs, despite commanding tens of thousands of soldiers. But here's the catch: Hitler loved giving officers bonuses, birthday gifts, and numerous rewards. This way, he killed two birds with one stone. The soldiers were happy with their pay, while officers happily received their gifts on the Führer's birthday. Let's return to Noah and his 30 Reichsmarks. That's around $12 to $13, and for comparison, British privates earned slightly less, from $11 to $23. American soldiers earned 3 times more. Still, Noah's salary can be considered decent. It was twice what a civilian worker in Frankfurt would make. And for each combat day, Noah would get half a mark as a bonus. In 1940, that looked like a fortune, as everyone believed the war would be over in a year and they could go home and buy a nice little house. How things turned out, we all know. But it was a sweet dream. Now, let's talk about another stereotype: hygiene. After World War I and the horrors of the Spanish flu, dysentery, and other trench diseases, it was believed that in the next conflict, the situation would be better. It indeed was, but the conditions for Noah were far from ideal. Alois Jäger and Helmuth Bosch, soldiers of the Wehrmacht, wrote an entire book on the hygiene of the Third Reich, and according to their accounts, conditions on the Eastern Front were catastrophic. Lice, parasites, wet feet, and other ailments plagued the Germans in droves, and there was no sign of the famous German meticulousness. Most likely, by 1940, Noah's situation was better, but as dozens of sources show, it was difficult to call the Germans clean. What do we have in the end? In the end, Noah was just another soldier like billions before and after him. The only difference was that the German army was marked by an overwhelming number of war crimes, which ironically, is forgotten by the Germans themselves. According to a poll by the DW Portal, 54% of Germans consider themselves descendants of Hitler's victims, but not soldiers who brought terror and disgrace. Ignoring this fact is impossible, and there was no SS committing crimes and an innocent Wehrmacht, where ordinary soldiers fought. The myth of the Wehrmacht has long been debunked, and its soldiers deserve the same historical disgrace as the rest of the Germans. Never in history has an army treated its opponents with such inhuman cruelty, violated the laws of war so often, and been so disloyal to human life. The laws of war? These so-called soldiers do not deserve a place in history except in the trash heap. Yes, there were exceptions, but the overwhelming majority of facts scream that the Wehrmacht was a gathering of war criminals. In 1940, they were still well-fed and pampered. But we all know what happened next. See you soon, friends.